Hello, welcome to another Parks Alliance live stream from the folks who brought you Parks Alliance Read Along and Parks Alliance Q&A. We have a pretty exciting session today with our Executive Director, Alex, and our Campaign Director, Lula, who've been doing an amazing job at leading the organization here. If you haven't met before, my name is Steve Taylor. I'm our Communications Director, and I am very privileged to work with both Alex and with Lula, who've been doing an amazing job at taking 2020 and making it better than it would have been without them, because it's been a tough year for all of us, absolutely. And you're going to have some time here till Alex and Lula will have a nice conversation about what they've learned in the past year and what we're doing going forward. So with no further ado, let me bring on Alex Doty and Lula Defersha. How are you both doing today?
Hi, Steve. That was a great intro. Thank you so much. Doing well. Can't complain.
Yeah, it's all relative now these days, isn't it?
Yeah, we could call this the Making Lemonade Lessons Learned report. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I'm so honored to be on the team with the two of you, and really proud to have the two of you leading the Parks Alliance. And we've had to do it. We've changed course a number of times, but I think always in the good way. And why don't I just pop off here and let the two of you talk about what you've learned?
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Well, here we are. What is it? 5 months, 6 months after the lockdown?
Yeah, and probably I think the thing that really struck me last month is, we're probably halfway through. So what had been started as a coping strategy to try and get through a couple of weeks is now turned into how do we make it through a year? How do we make it through 2020? And it's an experience.
It has been an experience. I saw a post that said 5 months ago we went home to work from home for 2 weeks, and here we are, 6 months later. I'm just like, you're right. Well, March 17 or halfway through March, when the world shut down, I don't think none of us really anticipated. I mean, maybe the experts, but.
No, I don't think anybody anticipated it being screwed up this badly. And so now here we are left to, in many ways, fend for ourselves as a city, as an organization, as rec centers, as Parks and Rec, and budget cuts had to happen everywhere, but Parks and Rec took a $12.5 million budget cut this year. There has not been a system that's taken a significantly bigger budget cut, and it was one of the most under-resourced Parks and Rec systems in the country before the budget cuts. So, it's been a scramble for us to try and figure out how to make a difference there, and there's no way that we can make up $12.5 million, but I just want to start out by saying thank you to the over 100 people who responded to our call for donations to the COVID response fund. And we got, at this point, we've raised just a little over $20,000 from individuals. We have a $10,000 challenge gift from a very generous donor. And then also working in cooperation with the Catherine Ott Lovell at Parks and Rec, we secured a $75,000 grant from the William Penn Foundation. So this summer we raised over $100,000 to be able to distribute to rec centers, and in its own way, that created a challenge for us, just because our plans were to try and distribute $20,000, and a very welcome problem to try and distribute $100,000, but we've now divided that work into 2 rounds of grants. So we distributed about $50,000 to over 50 rec centers this summer, and we're now entering a fall round and doing ordering for that right now, because rec centers are going to be just as pressed with schools closed and being, for many students, the place where they are still able to go in person. And we don't know exactly what that looks like, but we do know that it's important, and those rec centers and those rec leaders, need help. So, we're just so pleased to be able to contribute anything that we can.
Right.
what I find, and Lula, I don't know, I'd love to hear some of what you heard in your conversations with rec leaders, but rec leaders just, so many of them just pitch in, and it's like, okay, we've been making do forever. We'll make do some more. I'm not saying they're not happy about it, but they go at it every day.
Absolutely. And I think early on, we really learned to listen to the rec leaders before we made any decision in how we pivoted our approach, especially through COVID. So I feel blessed enough to have communicated with a few of the rec leaders throughout the past, month and a half or so. Steve and I had went out to visit them and had a conversation with them just to see what their needs were. And I think that's why we were able to fundraise the way that we did. I think that's why we were able to do the outreach that we did. And one of the things that I absolutely enjoy about my job is being able to connect with them on the regular basis as much as that I can. And that's something that I'm going to make it my mission to continue to reach out to them as much as I'm allowed to, as far as not to bombard them with so many questions because they're busy. They have so much going on. But early on, I think when we went to shut down as a country, we were thinking as an organization, what could we do? How could we contribute to the rec centers in a way that can help them, especially with the budget cut happening, with the uncertainty of COVID, and if we were going to have a summer camp and what that was going to look like. It was a lot of things up in the air. And I think those conversations were very helpful for us to determine in what ways we can contribute as an organization without overstepping on other people's toes.
Yeah, we're trying to find this balance between being responsive to what rec leaders express, but also there's not a lot of room or capacity to be trying to think about new things or new ways of doing things. Even to a certain extent, sometimes when it came to getting supplies, it's like when you say open-ended, you can have, let me know what you want. Whereas when we present more of a menu and say, well, these are what other rec centers have been requesting, trying to make it easier and easier for them to be able to make choices as we're understanding how we present good choices. But it's this loop that a rec center can get caught in, which is that they're taxed every day in order to get the basic everyday stuff done, and we want to try and give them a little more capacity to be able to do a little bit more. That will pay off in a couple months, but it doesn't pay off tomorrow. It takes more time tomorrow. So what we're learning is that in fact it's hard to give away money to rec centers. They're not set up for this. They're not. I think that when you think of Friends of Parks, they're more geared towards engaging more volunteers in being, and sort of having volunteer governance and not having staff, certainly not having staff doing program, and and also figuring out how to fundraise. And there's this really interesting dynamic, I think, which is very different for rec centers, where there is that staff and they can do stuff, but how do we provide support? And in the past, some of the thinking has been, well, let's try and create, a group for each rec center. And I've been in sort of the business of trying to figure out how to build organizational capacity in small scale kind of advocacy and volunteer efforts. And we don't need more. We don't need another nonprofit. Everybody kind of thinks that's sort of like it's like you start a new business, you start a new private, like that's a thing to lay claim to. And really what people want to do is they just want to volunteer, and they want to be able to give money to something, or to be able to do something meaningful at a center. And when we get too caught up in how you manage all of that, so how do we make that simple? How do we make it simpler for people to be able to find projects that they want to support with their time, with their treasure, and then how do we make those connections? Because what I continue to be impressed with in my first year is that rec centers they're so neighborhood based, right? I mean, they're blocks. We have rec centers, that are just 10 blocks apart, And so when you are saying that rec center serves an underserved community,
Mm-hmm.
a low-income community, then to expect that low-income community to then be able to do the fundraising to supplement the needs of that rec center is an unrealistic expectation. And yet, the profile and the platform isn't there to be able to draw the donations that would come from people who really want to support things like that, or the volunteer activity from more organized volunteer, and people who are kind of organize themselves as volunteers. And so, that's what, as we're also trying to scramble to provide supplies in a way that we haven't done before. And
Right.
I love doing online shopping for rec centers, but as you've heard me say, Lula, that's fun, but sometimes it feels like I'm having cake for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's just a bit much. But at the same time, trying to think sort of that bigger picture about how do we bring in more resources? How do we build this platform where rec centers can put their projects up in a forum that we create as the Parks Alliance to allow people to pick something that they want to fund, a little in the spirit of donors choose for teachers. And then also how do we get more volunteers out? So I think that we did a great job in fundraising for
Right.
the supplies over the summer. We have enough money to go do a second round of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the effort that we have now, and where we're looking to try and get more resources and asking people to be generous and giving towards, is our next step, which is how do we work on bringing in more volunteers? With a $12.5 million budget cut, Parks and Rec isn't going to be able to hire any staff to be able to add any capacity, both to the rec centers or to that project of trying to bring in more volunteers, which they all want, and which the rec centers desperately want. So, Lula, you want to talk a little bit about what we're planning on doing with some volunteer efforts in the next month or two?
Yeah, so you spoke a lot about the volunteer aspect of it, and also how do we one of the things that we have been talking about in our staff meetings, and just as we're continuing to pivot in our approach in connecting with the rec centers, also is how do we amplify their stories? So we are passing their information to folks who want to provide that support that Alex was talking about. But more recently, we talked about organizing volunteer opportunities with different rec centers. We have been in touch with a few. We'll confirm the date and time by the end of this week, or sometimes beginning of next week, and send it out. But we're trying to pretty much go to each rec center, ask them what their needs are, as far as whether it's a garden that needs to be put together, where's a cleanup that needs to happen, whatever their needs are. And we're going to coordinate a way that we can bring in volunteers to help clean up, help some of our rec leaders really make their job and their life easier by bringing extra support. So that's one way we're thinking about bringing in volunteer opportunities.
So we're thinking about service days or cleanup days outside, and really trying to get people to sign up so that we don't go to too many people as we try and navigate what all the protocols need to be to do this. We're really inspired by what Fairmount Park Conservancy has done with their Love Your Park Solo.
Yep.
And so, can we encourage that kind of activity around rec centers, and how do we provide some of the tools? My wife has fallen in love with the litter grabber, that trash grabber piece. So I think, that's, and then the other thing that we want to do is think about some of the things that are more programmatic, and are a little bit more challenging to try and navigate in terms of having people be with kids or inside the building or what have you. But there are, in addition to those litter cleanups, and we'll start scheduling those. And if you're listening to this and you show up to one of those, that's great. We want to be the first couple to be successful so that we have the impetus to kind of keep going. Then we got 3 other things that are program-wise that we're thinking about. And so one is that we're going to start up a pilot Girls Who Code club, a coding club at Amos Playground this fall. And if there are anybody who either has experience with coding clubs, Girls Who Code, or is enthusiastic about the idea, we would love to have some folks be able to have some volunteer energy around that. We've also had a rec center, a Carousel House, that is doing disc golf. So that is basically you're playing golf with frisbees. If there's anybody that's really enthusiastic about that, we'd love to connect folks to Carousel House. And if that's successful there, that may be something that we can also bring to other rec centers. And it's definitely a possibility for teens, socially distanced activity. And then the last is if we have any esports enthusiasts. We are one of the things that has been happening is we're have some rec centers that are interested in doing tournaments between rec centers, have some competition there. We also think that that has some possibility to, when people get excited about that, whether that can also, a certain number can move to a coding club. And one of the big things that's been asked for in our supplies is projectors and outdoor movie screens.
Absolutely.
So people doing outdoor movies, we expect to see some of that at rec centers this fall. But the other thing that certainly my kids have enjoyed doing is not only playing video games, but also watching video games. And so the potential to have kids sort of being social as a group, socially distanced outside, having this competition of esports on the big screen. So those are, we're gonna kind of see, we're at a point where we're testing out a number of things in different places, kind of seeing what works. If other folks have some ideas programming wise, but how do we try and add some new layers of programming that work within this
interesting time,
stay-at-home world? Yeah.
So what has been your most exciting part of this whole process? I mean, I think you mentioned earlier, like it hasn't been a year, right, since you joined the Parks Alliance?
It has been. It's so September 1st, it'll be a year. So I'm 50 weeks in.
50 weeks in, pandemic happened, and being able to. But I'm just curious, what has been so enjoyable so far for you?
Well, so I don't know. I don't know whether we're doing too much clapping each other on the back in the course of this day, but it was just me for several months. Brought in Steve for a few hours sometime in the fall, and so to me the big excitement was being able to get to the point of actually having a team, and being able to work as a trio. Disappointing that in person that happened for all of 2 weeks, but that, and I think that required, what that required was figuring out who the right people were to have there, which required having some direction, right? So it's I enjoy that piece of coming in and trying to figure out a strategic direction for an organization that's at a turning point or a crossroads. And that was definitely a really appealing part of the job. And then once that happened, you get to have the resources to bring in a couple of staff to start to make that happen. It's been both gratifying and I think a little draining or scary to, like, here was a strategic plan where it's like, great, we'll spend a year or two figuring out how to get this stuff up to speed. And I was like, no, the circumstances say this has to happen. This all has to happen faster. And people have responded generously, which has really made that possible. And at the same time, trying to do all of this while, I think trying to meet the moment at a time when I certainly don't feel, I am not 100%. I think trying to pretend that COVID hasn't had an impact on me, and I know how I know how privileged I am. I'm sitting on my backyard on a porch in West Philadelphia. I have access to a yard. We have plenty of bedrooms in the house. My kids are older, so they're not kind of running all under my feet. I have a job. There's the only thing that I'm worried about is the end of the world, right? I mean,
Right.
But
I thought it was very important to mention. I came in March. Alex was, and Steve being our part-time contracted, and then we have our amazing interns, Jack and Sarah, and Alexis, who left us. But when I came in, I had 2 weeks in the office, and then we went to the world shutting down, and then also having to learn what the needs of, and we were also in the process of doing the advocacy training, going to different rec centers and trying to provide that training for advocating for the budget and also what that looks like in different communities. So we were in the midst of a lot of different things when the world shut down, and then having to pivot to, okay, what do we do now? We know the budget hearing is coming up. I know we still have to talk to the city council members to make sure we're advocating on behalf of the different recreation centers, testifying at the hearing, and also being able to fundraise and staying in communication and truly listen to what the rec centers are saying. I think it has been definitely a journey, I'll say, but an exciting one.
Yeah, and how do we? It's almost about starting as a new team to develop those relationships with the rec centers and the people that are there, developing relationships with the leadership so that we're, developing things that fit in with the way that Parks and Rec runs. One of the things that we learned as we were trying to select finalists for Tools for Heroes was that some people were proposing really good ideas that were not allowed under Parks and Rec regulations.
Right.
And the Tools for Heroes has been a bit of a journey too. We're ready to go do a group purchase, at shopping day. Thank you, at Lowe's. Then it's like, okay, let's shut that down. Then trying to get gift cards into people's hands, and then having summer just take off on them. They really don't even have the space of the room to get to that, to those two lows to do those purchases. So figuring, okay, again, that's a thing where, all right, we should not be making, if you're not able to do this easily, we haven't set it up right. And, it's on us to start figuring that out. If it's hard for you to apply for a grant, we're not doing it right. If it's hard for you to report on that grant, we're not doing it right. If it's hard for you to get your supplies once we told you have money, we're not doing it right. Absolutely. And that's where I think, if you're gonna say is 100% of the money that I gave going directly into these supplies, it's like, well, that's a metric that's really nice to say, but if that's a standard that we were held to, if that's what we were aspiring to, we would be writing very large checks to a very small number of rec centers that were capable of being able to do this, and we wouldn't be writing them to the rec centers that need it the most. Right? So it's the work of being able to get in there, and then as we're developing those relationships, it's trying to hear more of what people need, trying to deliver, and the rec centers deserve a lot, and they're not asking for much. It doesn't take a lot to make a difference, and in many ways that's a failure of our society and our governance, city, state, mostly national, in not providing resources to those places. And that makes me angry, but it does make it so that we can make a difference with relatively, with a scale of actions that we can do as a, $450,000 a year budget nonprofit with 3 staff.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah.
Lula, what's been your favorite day this summer?
I have to say, being able to go out and meet, when we did our visits with different rec centers, Steve and we did a full day. I think we visited 8 or 10 recreation centers, and we were out from, I think, like 9 a.m. until about 5 p.m. And that was exciting for me because, like I mentioned earlier, I was new. I started in March, And 2 weeks later, we went into shutdown. So I didn't get the chance to really interact with a lot of the different recreation centers that we were serving. So that was my first time meeting a lot of them. And initially, I thought we were going to just go in, have a conversation about the Lowe's gift card and the process of it. But we ended up spending maybe more than 20, 30 minutes having a conversation with different rec leaders. And the conversation for me was very helpful because I got to know them and the work that they are doing, some of the aspirations they have for their community. I got to meet some community members who come and volunteer for years and years and years, 20, 30 years, who have contributed to that rec center in a way that I don't think you can capture. So that was beautiful for us to witness. And I think that was a reminder also for us, and we talked about it during our staff meeting, to always listen to what they are saying and what they're asking for. I think sometimes as an organization, it's very easy to fall under I think this is what they need, so we'll give you the resources, versus stopping to listen and understand and work with them to provide those resources that's truly needed. So that was my favorite moment, and still is. Anytime I get to go out and interact with the rec leaders, it's been truly an honor.
Along the theme of, making lemonade out of lemons, the program that I was just really impressed with this summer was at Penrose. It's a rec center in North Philadelphia. And one of the things that happened this summer is that some of the camps, because of such uncertainty about what the protocols will be like, health, all of these other things, didn't always have enough kids signing up for the camp. And so at Penrose, one of the things that was really important to Parks and Rec and to Catherine Ott Level there was to keep the workforce development teenage staffers on, even with this historic budget cut. So not having enough kids to have in camp there, the rec leader there, Cornelius, he got to make a camp out of his teenage staff, out of his workforce development staff, and did a teen entrepreneur camp, which was just, it was so great to hear about. We didn't get to spend as much time with them or there because of the restrictions on space. But, and I think that opened up, this summer opened up a possibility, showed the opportunity there that I hope, we can tell a story about and get more support for, where, the teens workforce development actually becomes, what they're doing, through this kind of workforce development camp. I'm a teen entrepreneur camp is what they call it. That's a great word for it. And I was also just pleased as punch that I was able to introduce, somebody that I had met in the course of other work. And a shout out to Tim Mack, who works for communications for Congresswoman Madeline Dean, but he grew up in Olney and was able to come and spend some time with that teen entrepreneur camp and be talking to them, which is one of my kind of things that I'd like to encourage more is, as we are talking about advocacy and we're an advocacy organization, how are we also training that next generation of advocates, and how are we pointing to social change and social change entrepreneurship, right? So there's this sort of teen entrepreneurship, but there's also, I bring entrepreneurial values to try and have creative solutions to societal problems, right? And to me, that's a definition of advocacy. So it was just, and I think that's a thing that, it's maybe a little bit of a more back burner thing that's developing for us. But, if certainly what Black Lives Matter has shown us is the energy and the need that there is for understanding social change and all of the mechanisms for how you bring about that change. And if we can be a small part of helping, a younger generation or really any age in how to engage in this work, I think that would be awesome.
Absolutely. And we have shared, Steve put the link in the comment section if you want to see more about Penrose Rec Center, the teen entrepreneurship that Alex was just speaking about. It's incredible. I was super impressed. I think they had their graduation last week, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, check out their Instagram page and you get to see what we're talking about. Should we show some of the photos that we have?
And I want to take a moment too to say that particularly before Lula came on, Steve really took the Tools for Heroes project in hand, and was a big part of being able to make that all happen in March, even though it didn't really happen until the summer.
It didn't quite happen, but it happened in a different way. So we can bring up a couple of the photos. These are actually not. Well, these are ones I should have brought up. Some of the ones from Lula. We went to 10 rec centers in 7 hours, I think it was. And now Alex went to one of those, and Lula and I split up in one of those too. But here are a couple of the ones of our first round, and these are photos by both. I think these are maybe all Lula's photos, maybe some Alex. This is Amos Rec Center. And I love the mural there. It's we must be the change we want to see in the world, which is brilliant. And this is a fun one. There's got to be a great story behind this. This is a great picture here. So someone's got to tell me about that.
Yeah, they were. So when I stopped by to Mandarin to drop off some of the items that we ordered for them from their wish list, the kids were just playing around outside. It was break. So when I pulled out my car, they saw these boxes just in the back seat. So obviously I couldn't carry it by myself. So they saw me just trying to pull one out. They're like, "Do you need help?" I was like, "Of course I do." So and there, I think I have pictures. I don't know if we have it up, but you can see them like going in my car and just like pulling the boxes and just kind of carry it in. And
you'll definitely share those pictures on social media later on. Absolutely. And here's one from Bear Rec Center here, and another one from Winchester Rec Center, and that's one of my favorite pictures ever. The Alex is going to blush when I share the next one here, but there we go. So tell us a bit of the story behind this one, Alex.
Well, you can take the guy away from the Bicycle Coalition, but you can't take the bicycle away from the guy. So we were a little, just a little bit of a snafu with our ordering. So I had to hand deliver supplies to Myers Rec Center. And so I live half of 3/4 of a mile away. So I had things delivered to my house. And I also have to thank my family for putting up with boxes in the living room over the last month. But was then able to go make that delivery. And those are fun times. I'm glad that they're, certainly Parks and Rec had a distribution system and they did really well with that. But it was fun to be able to take on a few of those for ourselves because playing Santa Claus ain't bad.
Yeah, they were
fun. It's fun to pop in here briefly, but I want to let you two get back to your conversation, so I will take myself off and let you go.
Well, Steve, I think that we might be, we had said we'd do this for half an hour. So, Steve, what was your favorite day? Since in this,
you know the answer to that one. What was the day that our gotta get maximum props to our intern Jack, who booked all of our visits that day. That Luke and I did those 10 rec centers in 7 hours, and it was pretty cool. It was amazing, but also because I am so excited to be part of this team. It's been such a great year for me to be friends with both of you and also be colleagues with you. But also, this is this isolation thing. It's tough. And that one of the things I realized, like, wow, there are people out there in the world, and I'm seeing them today. And that was a pretty cool day. But also, it reminded me, like, that it was a check, and I had to say, like, wow, I'm really missing in-person contact, and that was.
But this was not the first time that you were at some of these rec centers, because you've got some relationships with some of these places going back.
Yeah, I have working with the Bicycle Coalition in Greater Philadelphia. I had a chance to be in a bunch of those places, and some of them actually more in the second round ones there. So just already knowing what the importance of them as community hubs. I mean, obviously, all the services, all the things that are also there, but just the fact that these are, as you stated earlier, that these are such essential parts of the neighborhood, and 150 rec centers, 150 parks we have in Philadelphia, and that is amazing, and that is like but obviously chronically underfunded, and that's why you came up with the idea to do Tools for Heroes originally, before all this pandemic stuff happened. And it was so important before that, and even more important before. And it was just to be able to connect with all these folks who are just have these great plans to do gardens, and some of the maybe the more fun side, gardens. Other sides, like, they really need cleaning supplies. And that was a reminder of, like, okay, gardens are fun. However, every rec center in Philadelphia needs more cleaning supplies. It means more funding for the basic stuff that just to keep them running. And then to have a chance to meet the staff and the volunteers who keep these ones moving was just such an honor.
Absolutely, I have to agree.
And I think that puts us in a good place where we can be doing some practical things that people can support right now, but we're also building up the knowledge and the storytelling that speaks to the wider advocacy about the fact that this can't be fixed by individual donations, right? We can make a difference, but $12.5 million budget cut is a big budget cut, and the one thing that I will say right now is, when to go into rec centers and see what's happening there. So it's just a little slice that's my purview that I know about. Right. And then to have the leaders of the Senate saying, we don't want to bail out cities, democratic cities, because they're mismanaged. I just like it leaves me partly speechless, right? Even if that was true, why would you leave behind the kids that are in the rec centers? It's not true. And get off your duff, Senate. And we need those federal resources. We need that stimulus money. So that'll be my soapbox moment to close on here. But we wanted to get together and also have a chance to report back to the 100 folks and who gave to our fund, and to share with the various folks within Parks and Rec how grateful we are for the work that we're doing and how proud we are to be able to play a small part in supporting your work.
Absolutely. We're grateful. We really are. I feel honored to work with you two, and Sarah and Jack, who also are interns. It's been an interesting time to be alive, I would say. However, and also I feel grateful to have the relationships that we have built with the recreation centers, some of our partner organizations, our donors who stepped in and have been able to provide the support that they did. I'm very grateful.
All right, Steve, you want to give the voice of God ending to this?
Well, all right, then we'll bring up the title card and we'll close it out here. And thank you everyone for joining us. And if you're still watching now too, you can still share, because this will be on our YouTube and our Facebook channel for as long as the world still exists, which we hope will be at least another year or so. And so that is it. Again, thank you very much. And it's been so nice to hear you do there and do this. And here we go. Bye-bye.